Okay, guys, so how is AI going to affect the future global economy? Okay, let's get into it. Hi, guys, welcome to Aldi Mastery. I'm Llewellyn Devereaux. This is the channel where we talk about economics, business, and progressive mindset, right? And today, I didn't want to do this conversation, but I figured it made sense because everyone's going about AI, and I figured let's jump into it in terms of what's happening when it comes to the job market, right? Because of AI and all the layoffs that are happening. So this conversation really is really more about saying that AI is not here to steal your job. AI is just here to change the job description. So let's get into what AI is doing in the job market today. So let's start off. The first things first is obviously the situation with the layoffs, right? We've seen the last couple of years, especially, let's say since COVID, right? I mean, we'll go into it later on, but for the most part, when COVID happened, we saw a lot of big layoffs happening. Like all the tech companies were layoffing, getting rid of people, retrenching people. It was a situation that, like, we have not seen those kind of numbers since the recession in 2008, right? And the real interesting conversation that I want to just kind of really lay the situation with is the fact that we we've often underestimated how fast our world is moving and how many things are changing in our world. And as a result of that, the companies, obviously, because they are profit driven and they have to provide shareholder value, they're constantly finding new ways of how to, create better efficiencies, automations and whatnot, and that ultimately results in people at the bottom and the middle kind of being laid off, right? Being laid off. And for the most part, we've seen many times it was always been automation. It was always about how machine replaces a human being, right? And that's just what's been happening for the longest time. But for the most part now, what we're starting to see right now is that we're moving towards an age of from automation to augmentation. But I'll get into that a bit later. But for now, I wanted to start off with the fact that we have seen since COVID. I mean, we saw the tech companies before COVID happened. There was a lot of capital. Capital was easily accessible, and so as a result of capital have being easily accessible, the tech companies they went and hired thousands and thousands of people into the job market, well, into their companies, right? And then when COVID happened and everyone was moving towards tech, and it was ordering online, it was Zoom this, it was Zoom that, it was all these. If we were just in a whole tech frenzy when COVID happened because we were all staying at home. We were working from home, and all those technological shifts made sure that we stayed at home, right? So for the most part, in that time, the tech hires obviously ballooned, right? Then obviously after COVID went away and they didn't have use for those employees. What happened was that there was a whole bunch of layoffs from all the tech companies, Microsoft, Facebook, Amazon, you name it. They all went through and shed a lot of people in tech, and tech kind of went through its own little situation a couple of years ago. But now, years later, we have AI that has come into the situation now with all the different models that have come in: ChatGPT, Claude, DeepSeek. We've got Gemini. Everybody and their mom is coming out with a whole AI system right now. Meta's got a new one as well. And for the most part, what's happening now is that these are obviously learning models that are obviously learning about humanity, learning about retrospective information on the internet and whatnot. And the question really is, as a result of this situation, result of these AI models, we've had a lot of people. Obviously, we've seen a shift in schooling. We've seen a shift in how right now people are using AI to kind of cheat in tests, cheat in schools. Well, we've seen McKinsey apparently had a situation where they were caught using AI in terms of in their consulting processes. You know what I mean? But for the most part, over the last couple of years, especially the last year in 2025, we've had over 100,000 employees impacted by AI when it comes to layoffs, right? So over 100,000 employees have been laid off as a result of AI, according to reports, right? We've seen over 30,000 employees have already been impacted in 2026 alone because of AI driven efficiencies that have been created, right? So for the most part, apparently 45 plus CEOs from Fortune 500 companies are already saying that more layoffs are going to be coming as a result of these AI models and efficiencies that are being created by AI. So the question that we have to ask ourselves right now is, really, what does this mean? Because is it just like a simple automation or simple layoff where it's like, something comes in and someone is fired? Is it going to be that radical, that dramatic? Because for the most part, more than 60% of all layoffs that have been apparently caused by AI have come from companies that have over 100,000 employees. So you're looking at the really big companies that are going to be feeding this, right? And you're obviously looking at your white collar companies or white collar jobs, because before automation affected your blue collar job specs, right? So where machines came and replaced human beings, really was it came down to finding better ways to do things, faster ways to do things, or robots replacing humans. So automation basically came and replaced humanity or human beings. That's how it happened in the beginning. But now we're seeing that where the radical shift is coming in the fact of coming for white collar jobs. So your finance, your consultants, your software engineers, your coders, you know what I mean? So people that write programs, like right now it has been so hectic in a sense that these are the guys that have been attacked where they've been originally been perceived to have been safe before, whereas now it's not so much so the question we have to ask ourselves is actually what's going to be happening. But before we jump into that, let's go back into the 18th century with the Industrial Revolution, because ultimately during the Industrial Revolution, that was where the first time we saw automation really take its place, right? We had the steam engine coming into the game. We had steel. For the most part, production and processes obviously boomed, right? That's where Henry Ford came into the play with the Ford model, where obviously we had the what do they call the conveyor belt system, where the plant was basically built up or broken up into multiple aspects to basically create better efficiencies. We had the 8-hour workday being created at the time. But for the most part, what people don't know is that the Industrial Revolution actually created more jobs than it took away. Because obviously before that, human beings, everything was much slower. Everything was not as efficient as it is with automation, right, with machines at the time, right? We're able to churn out more things, more products, more services. And so from the Industrial Revolution, we've basically become a better species, a faster generation, a faster a bunch of species, because now what we're doing is that we're producing more value, more services, more efficiency, at less of the cost. And so we're also kind of maximizing human potential, human efficiencies at the same time. So that happened where Industrial Revolution actually created more jobs than what it took away, okay? And this is obviously just a concept that was also created in 1948 by a guy called Joseph Schumpeter, right? He coined the term creative destruction, which basically talks about corporate evolution, how there's always going to be a better way or a faster way of doing something that's going to basically eliminate an old way of doing things. So in our case, look at it like we had Morse code, or the telegram going to Morse code, telephone to cell phone, right? We went from vinyls to CDs, or vinyls to cassettes, to CDs, to MP3, to streaming. We went from the more difficult ways of doing things to easier ways of doing things. So as a species, we are constantly doing things better, trying to make things better. We're constantly doubling our processing speed, doubling the ways we do things. So this is who we are as a species. We constantly are evolving. We're constantly becoming better. We make better things all the time. So it really comes down to understanding that even when it comes down to AI, right, because a lot of people have not come to understand exactly how things are going to be going on and what actually is happening with AI, what I can guarantee is that this is just the next level of human evolution once again. And the corporate evolution, creative destruction of this aspect of everything also has to basically converge, right, and align itself to where we're going. So it really has forced us now to ask ourselves, what is value, right? What is value? Because you'll find in some countries and governments where they really didn't like automation, because automation meant less jobs, right? And if there's less jobs, it means that elections are not won. So you must understand that there's always going to be a correlation between elections and jobs. And so when there's too much automation in an economy and there is a slow upskill process for the citizens of the economy of the country, you have a situation where there's lagging effects, and as a result of that, automation then is despised for people to maintain their jobs. You know what I mean? And but right now what's happening is that we have to ask ourselves, as I said, what is value? What actually does it mean to go to work, put in a shift of work, put in 8 hours or 10 hours or 15 hours into work? What does it actually mean? And this is what AI is forcing people to understand, because before, we knew Gen X was, get a job, get a good job, get a good degree, get married at 21, buy a house at 25, and basically have kids. That was the Gen X model. Whereas right now, interest rates are very high. People can't afford, or inflation is high. People can't afford housing anymore. People are living with their parents for a very long time. People can't afford, the price of cars has obviously extremely increased. And so right now, we're seeing that the ways of living life according to Gen X's back in the day is no longer the way life is today. Basically, everyone is just saying 2026, the strategy is to survive. You know what I mean? We've got World War III looming in the mix, but that's a story for another video. But for the most part, the question we're asking ourselves right now is, what is value? Because at the end of the day, you're constantly going to have a situation where anything is going to be inputs and there's going to be outputs. There's going to be demand and supply. There's going to be buyers and sellers in a market and in an economy. But the question is, once again, what is value? And I think that is what AI is forcing us to really confront and ask ourselves. And so what I'm seeing for the most part is a hollowing effect. And a hollowing effect means that what's happening now is that it's AI is not necessarily eliminating jobs, right? What it's doing is that it's eliminating specific tasks. So the real junior entry level positions, the things that are menial, like when it comes down to copywriting, when it comes down to elemental systems of design, for instance, like being able to just it's kind of removing unnecessary processes in the workflow process model right now. And I think that's really what it's going to be doing for the next 2-3 years, or the midterm versus the long term, right? And I think that is creating better efficiencies, but for the most part, it is also removing a lot of jobs, or forcing those jobs or those people in those jobs to evolve with the times. Once again, creative destruction. And so we really have to ask ourselves, as it is right now, is what I'm doing necessary going forward? Is what I'm doing, is it being hollowed out and being replaced with something that is more meaningful? Am I creating value? Am I adding value? Is the task I'm doing, is it easily replaceable? What am I doing? Because obviously that's what it comes down to, because like I said, analysts, your consultants, your people in finance are going to be struggling right now, even when it comes on to legal, because you must understand something, that these AI models are able to basically go through like insane amounts of data in a fraction of the time it takes a human being to process this information. And so the question we have to ask ourselves once again is the fact that, who still wants to battle with waiting too much time to gather information? Who wants to battle with a lot of time to kind of be able to analyze a market? You know what I mean? No one is trying to do that anymore. And so right now we have to face the fact that what AI is going to allow us to do is really help us make things move much faster, especially information, and being able to extract information from the ether, from obviously archives and retrospective information. You know what I mean? So it really has, it's time we have to ask ourselves and say, humanity as a whole, humanity as a species is now entering its next level of evolution. And I think the next level of evolution is not necessarily to say that it's automation. As I said, it's machine versus man. I think right now we're moving towards augmentation, which is now the cyborg model, where human and machine are converging into one, right? Where we're seeing a situation where it's not human without machine, or machine without human being. It's human being with machine. And I think, as it is right now, we're seeing the situation where the AI models, as much as they're powerful and they're really powerful systems that are operating right now, but it seems to me that they can't necessarily, they still require inputs from human beings, right? Human beings are obviously creative beings by natural dispersion. And so the question, not really the question, but the real power and the real play of the augmentation model is the play between human being inputting into the AI model, which has retrospective knowledge and retrospective information to create something new. Because for me, what I'm seeing is that the AI models can't necessarily, and aren't going to be in the next 3 years, to be able to generate their own ideas, right? Because the human brain is, or the human spirit is its own thing on its own, right? So what I'm seeing is that we're moving towards a situation where inputting, or being able, the minds that are going to be controlling or helping the AI learn, and the AI being able to give inputs, are going to be very prized. There's going to be a very high prize when it comes down to being able to extract the most out of AI models going forward. So looking at this whole thing of augmentation versus automation. So as before it was about automation, whereas now it's about augmentation. So And it's really interesting, because when people talk about layoffs and whatnot and say, okay, everyone's going to be getting laid off by AI, and it's going to be a thing where we're going to be shedding hundreds and thousands of jobs, that's not the case. And like I said, it's forcing us to evolve, ask ourselves what is value, where we're going as a species, and what exactly do we need to remove from the work process between inputs and outputs to make our lives and things much easier for us as a species. But for the most part, the question comes down to, if everyone is getting laid off, and the economy requires consumers to basically spend in the economy, does that kind of work for AI to then kind of be the system, or the thing that kind of forces layoffs to happen in the economy? No, it doesn't make sense. So what's going to happen with all these layoffs is that they're either going to have to be upskilled and moved towards another part of the economy. I don't know, but for the most part, it seems to me as though it's a time in our species where we're forced to learn and we're forced to evolve and ask ourselves really important questions. But for the most part, my prediction comes down to saying that there isn't a need to panic. There isn't a need for you to be stressed about the fact that AI is going to replace your job. It really is a time for you to self-introspect and to force yourself to kind of learn and to be able to understand that right now there's a high rise in demand for soft skills. But what do I mean by soft skills? Soft skills are, your negotiation tactics, your emotional intelligence, your ability to be able to lead, manage people. You know what I mean? Because once again, like I said, it comes down to the power right now is going to be, or the power that's going to be working with the augmentation process is going to be about how human beings can input knowledge and or not input commands into AI models that are going to make things more efficient and things better for us as a species. So it really comes down to, like I said, it's about knowing how to prompt, knowing how to check, how to implement AI work, how to be able to know which models to go to, when to go to them, and to be able to extract the best value out of each AI model. So it's once again, it's really just man with machine versus machine without man, or man without machine. So it's really not a time for you to panic. It's a time for you to ask yourselves, what value am I creating? And not to panic about the layoffs, because once again, in corporate culture in today's age, you find a lot of times where companies are really just shedding jobs or shedding employees because they want to basically make sure that they create shareholder value by basically shedding a lot of employees, right? Because once again, there's less on your bottom line, or there's more on your bottom line at the end of the day. So there's a lot of greed going on. The world has obviously changed, but it really comes down to, as a person, forcing yourself to make sure that you learn what's going on. You understand you can't just be a person living on a rock anymore. You know what I mean? So force yourself to learn things. Force yourself to learn the soft skills. Force yourself to learn what it means to be able to be a cyborg and basically be able to operate human and AI models together and fuse them into something that obviously creates new value and new efficiencies for the species. And I think that's where we're going right now. So I don't want people to panic. I want you to understand that things are changing, that we're going through an evolutionary period in our species as a whole. And don't worry too much about what's going on in the media and the frenzy the media wants to create around AI and whatnot. It will be somewhat of a bubble in the next couple of years, but for the most part, like I said, AI isn't going to steal your job. It is just here to change the job description. So that's what it comes down to, and we'll leave it at that. So thank you for joining us. Until next time. Boom.